Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. My name's Dulta Doherty, and in this podcast series, I will be speaking to investors, advisors, entrepreneurs, and recruiters who are based all over the world, and we'll be discussing how to set up, scale, and operate a world-class recruitment company. Today's guest is not a recruiter, and she doesn't do much work in the industry. However, I am lucky enough to have had her team work on some of our media. We are based down in Arundel in West Sussex, and her company, her name's Jane Mote, and her company is Beach to Beach, and she is an absolute treasure of information, of everything to do with media and marketing, and we were lucky to get the chance to work with her. So hope you guys enjoy this interview. Before setting up her own company, Jane has had a seriously successful career with the BBC in radio, TV, and in online works. And we really got to grips with what it was like for her starting out, how she managed to advance her career, and what ultimately led her to setting up by herself and helping young people locally get a start, and what her real passions are for business and storytelling. Great guest, and hope you guys enjoy it and will take something from it. A big shout out to our sponsors, Interview. I'm really grateful for the partnership that we have with Interview and for them letting me use their product in recompense for giving the odd shout out on the podcast here. I get a lot of value out of their product so far. As I'm speaking, I'm doing a lot of videos on their intro product, which means that I can send a video to my first LinkedIn connections. They can watch the video and then I'll know who's watched it. And I'm trying to do a video for every scenario so my team can automate as much of the process as possible and get me calls with the best people out there that I need from a client and a candidate perspective. So I'm really enjoying this collaboration and I can't recommend it enough. Jane Mote. Is it Mote?
It's Mote, like Note. Very simple.
Can't call you Jane Moe.
No, but I drink it.
I bet you would. Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. And this will probably go out to a more general audience as well. So we're calling it the Recruiter Startup Podcast because that's what the existing platform is. But you know lots more about media than most people in the world. So that's why you're here today.
Well, the world's a big place. I don't think I can call that, but certainly in my part of the world, I'm fairly knowledgeable.
In my world.
In your world,
yeah. In this room. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
I would say I'm a storyteller. I've been a storyteller since I started work as a journalist in newspapers, and then I went into the BBC and worked on radio and television as a reporter and then a producer. And I've gone on to work in all sorts of different types of television and different media. But I think whatever you're doing, you're telling stories, and I'm really interested in people and their stories.
How do you tell a good story?
By being honest, by being direct, by being people focused, in my view.
And is there, they say it obviously needs a start, a middle, and the end. Is there a way that you try and break that down, or?
Well, I say stories, sharing stories with people is as basic to human life and happiness as sharing food with people.
Yeah.
And there are many recipes in the food world. I mean, that's why there's so many successful books and so on. Yeah. So how you do your story, how you cut it up, how you shape it depends on who you're doing it for, what platform you're doing it for, what you're trying to achieve with it. So, and the same story can be cooked in many different ways. So actually I can't answer that with a simple answer because there is no secret formula. There's lots of things that you learn over time. And if it's a longer story, you do have to have more structure to it. Absolutely. And you can decide whether you're teasing somebody in or whether you're hitting them between the eyeballs. And, you know, there's so many different ways. And I love the fact that we have so much choice in how to do that now.
In case you didn't notice, I'm Irish. And storytelling is very much part of our culture from the time of the Shanachie.
Exactly.
And that where... And I think it's a common thread with Irish people and how they communicate. And when I go home this week, I know that that's going to be a reoccurring thing of us rehearsing old stories and being in the pub and doing that. Do you come from a household of storytellers?
Half my family's Irish. So my granddad was a Yorkshire miner, but he was from Ireland. You know, his family's from Ireland, and he did not stop telling stories. I mean, he could tell a story about anything. Yeah. He had an opinion on everything. And in our family, we did a lot of after dinner sitting around talking about politics, life, whatever. You know, it was valued in our lives, definitely.
Did you have to be a good storyteller in your house to get the oxygen?
As the youngest of four, yeah. It was always hard to get the oxygen in a big family. You know, you don't get your look in unless you find a way to tell your story. So yeah, it's still very frustrating.
Why did you become a journalist?
I was nosy.
Are you still nosy?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I used to watch back in the day. You'll see my age now. I watched Michael Parkinson on TV. You know, prime time viewing and all the rest of it, and found out he was married to my mum's cousin, who was a Nolan actually. So yeah, Mary Nolan as it was then. And I thought, I want to be like him. Yeah. So I found out he'd worked in newspapers. I applied to the Yorkshire Post, not realising that not being from Yorkshire, despite my family heritage, would never get me a look in. But I did start in newspapers because I thought it was good to have a foundation and know your craft before you start to, you can't go straight to being on TV. You don't have much knowledge then.
What makes Parkinson so special?
I think just his questions. He was so good at getting to the point of questions and without seeming to making it look effortless. So you didn't realise he was doing it. He obviously knew a lot. He was a good journalist. Yeah. And he is a good journalist. He hasn't died. He's still with us. So yeah, he is a good journalist.
He had a wonderful rhythm to the way he asked questions, and he was able to ask very personal questions without it seeming like he was overstepping the mark.
Yeah, he didn't come over as offensive, and he got things from people that other people didn't do. Yeah. You know, Muhammad Ali is the sort of most famous one, but you know, people came back again and again to talk to him. I mean, you know, you could sit behind in a bar with him and have the same sort of conversation. I'm sure. I actually did meet him years later when I was working at the BBC in a bar at 2 a.m. in Pebble Mill. And I think he was not in the mood to be talked to because he was like in his own world. But then I told him who my granddad was, and that changed everything.
Oh, wow.
My granddad was one of four of his brothers were all counsellors, and they all gave Michael stories back in the day. So,
wow.
It was a nice moment.
That's amazing. So let's jump into those days, the 90s, the hedonistic 90s. Were you a wild child back then?
I don't want to talk about that.
It's a long time ago. You can get away with it now.
Oh my God, the things that you used to do, though, in the media. You know, you'd have 3-hour lunches and things like that. You just don't do that anymore. No. And it was pretty full on. I mean, it was more difficult when you were doing radio, or having to be broadcasting because you couldn't slow your words. So the alcohol went down at that time. Some people managed to do both. I couldn't.
Before we hit record, I was saying to you that I'm fascinated by the 90s. I love Oasis. I feel every time I turn on, definitely, maybe I'm just brought back to this period of time that I just about missed because I'm 36. So
yeah, I've got 20 years on you.
Yeah. So but like it's the big breakfast, Oasis, all like the Labour Party, all of that stuff is really what I see when I see the 90s. What comes to your mind?
It's interesting. I found it quite a challenging time as a person who was working. It was very chauvinistic. There were no women in management when I started. Never had been in newspapers or the BBC where I was.
You making the tea and
I mean,
jokes?
my first interview, I was told, that I didn't take the job. It was for a newspaper group, and they said, I expect you to to wear skirts and not trousers to work, and you should be making the tea.
Wow.
So it was normal, and there were a lot of bullies in the workplace.
Yeah.
And also in the Thatcher era with producer choice in the BBC and John Burt coming in, things got very, very different for the BBC. So it'd been this very sort of avuncular family place to work, and suddenly we were putting a price on everything, a cost on everything, and some of it was worth doing, but a lot of it was just dogmatic rather than pragmatic, and things changed quite a lot. But luckily the change then started to be in favour of this isn't the right way to do things. So I benefited from that because there was more training available for women, particularly, and that helped me enormously.
And what did you start at in the BBC?
I started on the news organisation desk, booking camera crews and doing CFAX pages. And I'd been working 7 years as an investigative journalist in newspapers, so it was quite a come down, but I got paid more. And I hung around on my days off, and I learnt radio on the sideline. And within 3 years, I was running BBC Wales Today, first woman non-Welsh person running a daily news show.
Let me jump into that, but let me jump back into the 7 years investigative journalism that we just we just well, what type of stuff were you investigating?
Oh, well, when I was in Wales, I was investigating the fact that miners had their redundancy, and somebody had got hold of a list of all their redundancies and was ripping them off, selling them cars which didn't actually exist. And I actually went on my own to Germany to accost the person who was scamming them, which was quite scary. No mobile phones in those days, and I found myself in the middle of nowhere, wondering, on the East German border, confronting a guy. I'd spoken German to try to find his address, pretended I was his girlfriend, and all sorts. So that was quite scary. And I did things like investigations into the horse meat trade, tracking horses from the market in Llanybother that were going to be live exported illegally, and all sorts of stories like that. So
and so you took a step down essentially in your career to move forward.
I've done that a lot, and I think that's a really sensible thing to do, because when you go in at a lower level, people don't quite look at you, so you get away with stuff, and also you can observe them. So from a less elevated place in that newsroom, I was able to build relationships, observe things.
Were you not as big a threat maybe to...
I don't think people knew quite who I was or what I was about to do.
What did you do?
Well, I managed to be a radio reporter in a very short space of time. I was working when I was not paid, on a day off, and it happened to be the day Nelson Mandela was released. And they didn't really have any reporters, so I got to tell the story and read the news of that, which was amazing. So, never say that it's not worth working for nothing, because sometimes you just get the best opportunities. And then I worked through the night on radio when the first Gulf War started, and I would just happen to be the person last in the newsroom. There was something made me stay on, and I saw the CNN line come up, which was, anti-aircraft gun fire heard over Baghdad, and I stayed through the night and cut 60 tapes. It was tape then. God, it's so funny, isn't it? And I'd called my news editor. It took him a while to come in, and then I became the night editor for the whole war. And so it's like putting yourself out gets you in a good position. You've got to be in it to win it. So
a news editor for a war, that's incredible. When I think about that, like I think about the American media now and how it's not partisan.
Oh, well, thankfully, so far in Britain on broadcast media, there's enough regulation to not let that happen, although some could argue that listening to the BBC some days, you wonder if they're paying attention to that. But legally, we can't be partisan on broadcast media, but we can in newspapers. And I think what's happened to newspapers in this country is dreadful. There's so little choice now of independent journalism, and there's so little funding mechanism for it. So I'm part of the Byline movement. So the Byline Festival's in Sussex soon, and I've subscribed to their new newspaper. And it's a whole organisation run through the Frontline Club as well in London, which is about independent journalism. And as a democracy, we have to value that.
Yeah, and do you feel like the BBC has still stayed strong throughout all
No.
the influences? Or?
No, I think it's really difficult for the BBC because all its funding comes from government, and whatever you try to do, it's very difficult not to be influenced by that.
Yeah.
And it's been a very difficult time, and the cutbacks don't help because you have less people you give less creativity to people, especially once you're in the 24-hour news cycle. So it's an opportunity for those of us trying to place stories, of course.
Yeah. Do you trust any media out there right now?
That's a really good question. I think Byline is probably the place I'd go to, and some independent bloggers and so on. But I think even the Guardian, there are agendas in there as well. So I suppose you tend to follow journalists. Someone like Gary Young or Carol Cadwalader, I'd listen to.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I follow individuals too. I'm not so sophisticated. So Joe Rogan is probably somebody that I would follow quite a lot. I tie into his messages a lot. But it's hard to... I couldn't watch mainstream media anymore. I can watch the BBC sort of at breakfast time.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like American journalism, the American broadcasters are just...
Well, I've just been judging for the Wickers. I'm a judge for Alan Wicker's Foundation, and we're doing the Audio Awards at the moment. I've been listening to some great stuff from PBS, and public service radio in America. So there is some good going on, and I think podcasts help with that as well.
Yeah, do you listen to any podcasts?
Not regularly, except for yours, of course.
Yeah, of course. She doesn't really. Well, actually, you do when you produce them.
Yes, I do, exactly. Yeah.
So you got the big job, BBC. You're reporting on the wars, all of that. What was next?
Well, I moved with the BBC to London, and I set up the BBC's first tri-media newsroom, radio on TV, on radio, online. It came from our marketeers, and it was BBC London, and that was just like the most amazing job. I mean, I'm reporting on the capital for the millennium, and it was great, and I loved it. But I didn't want to die with BBC on my tombstone. So
how many people were in the newsroom when you were doing that?
200 in the team, because we had a radio station online, everything, and lots of freelancers on top of that. So.
Is there a lot of rivalry between radio and TV within the BBC?
No, what I did was they used to be very siloed, and what I did was create one unified management team, and everyone had an equal seat at the table, including online, which was a baby in those days.
Wow.
One didn't understand that. And I said, every platform has its job. And I did a Venn diagram and said, you're handshaking between the stories where the overlaps are.
Yeah.
We're not trying to create stories that only work in the middle. They have to be right for the media. But, everything has a weight, and you can cycle audiences through things.
Yeah. And
audiences need different media for different moments in their day or their lives.
How long does an average news cycle last now with people's attention spans? Is it 24-hour we're living in?
At best.
Really?
Yeah.
And then it's on to the next.
Yeah. What I think a lot of journalists miss is going back on stories. Yeah. So that you can get some
and
amazing
content creators
follow-up.
Right?
Follow-ups is great. Leave it a year, go back, see what's happening. It's amazing what you can find out. You've already built a relationship with the person that you're reporting on.
Yeah, they say that with creating pieces of content as well, like blogs. So you put it out, if it goes well, you kind of go back to the year later and you edit things that you think may be more topical to it, add it to it, and then it goes again.
Totally.
And it lives and lives and lives.
I don't think people should be afraid of reversioning, recutting, and so on. So anyway, after the BBC, I took a side step or down step or whatever.
Yeah.
So I went from having 200 plus people to 6 and running the Community Channel, which is a charity television channel. I went on secondment for the BBC, so I didn't take a complete plunge. And I learned about TV management, and after that I went into UK TV and became a commissioner, and then I became director of lifestyle and factual TV channels, so I ran 6 TV channels there.
Did you know the internet was going to be what it became?
I had a sense that it would be enormous, and I did one of the first websites for the BBC when the London Mayor referendum came up. The mistake I made was the URL was something like London Mayor referendum or something, which was very fixed in time, and of course you've got to build your traffic over time. This was way back. But I really liked the media because it was on demand, and so people can choose what they're doing when they're doing it, and it was a great place to have depth and breadth and different mixed media within it. So I love it.
I feel like it's all amalgamated into the one now properly. Like, so now a podcast could be live streamed, it could be videoed, So it becomes a version of a TV show, depending on where it goes. If it goes out to Netflix, if it goes out like.
Totally, but what you would be talking less about is websites.
Yeah.
You know, those were big back in the day. Now they're like, oh, right, okay, that's your brochure, that's your printed brochure of the past, isn't it? It's a place of record, and it's something you've got to do, a little bit of a shop window, but really you're going to meet people's expectations and get their hearts and minds going by your social media.
I get nothing on my website. People check it out to make sure I'm not a complete blackguard.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, oh, your website's really nice. And go, oh, thanks. And then that's it. And then that's it. But the funnel, as we'd say, our sales funnel is social to call.
Totally. And a lot of companies now don't bother with websites. They go straight to Facebook.
Yeah.
And depending on what you're doing, that can be fine.
A lot of bad advice out there from marketers who try and sell you the funnel to get you to the website, so you can buy the website, so then you do the traffic. You're almost double hitting your traffic to take it from social to a website to a call, when you can just go straight from one to the next.
You need to think about who you're trying to get to and make it as easy as possible for them.
Yeah. So the world of TV, you're a commissioner. What does that mean?
Basically, you create a strategy for each of the TV channels for the content that you're looking for. I compare it to being, rather than buying off the peg clothing, you're buying something from a tailor. So if you're a TV channel, you have a need for a program for 8 p.m. in this type of genre, you go out to the independent film world and you say, right, we need program ideas. A commissioner gets those ideas in, helps to shape them, then they get made, and as they're being made, looks at how they are and makes sure that they actually turn out to be what the channel wants.
You're the kingmaker.
Well, I'm the content maker. I don't know about kingmaker. I became actually in charge of channels after that, which was a bit more of the kingmaker role.
Yeah.
So you get a tick. You get a tick on. You set the strategy for what you want.
Yeah.
You get a say in the commissioning, but you're also creating the whole atmosphere of the channel, the branding, the any web or interactivity alongside it. The whole thing is what you're doing. So I ran a food channel, a home channel, a history channel.
Have you any like greatest hits that you helped to?
I mean, I love doing all the food stuff. Created a daily food show, Market Kitchen, with all the big names, in food. Rachel Allen from your part of the world, and met all the big names in food. But I suppose my most amazing swan song at UK TV was one of my channels was called Eden, which is mainly natural history content, and it was David Attenborough's 85th birthday, and we did a big multimedia project around his best moments, and I live produced his interview with Ben Fogle at the Natural History Museum with interactivity coming in alongside it, and then created it into a TV programme that went out on the channel. So I got to spend the day with him. I mean, I'd spent a bit of time with him before, but that was pretty special.
How far removed did you get from the day-to-day cutting and slicing?
I mean, it's very unusual for me to be in the front line again, but it got to a point there seemed to be 20 people in the gallery and no one had any live broadcast experience. And I did news for years, so I'm used to being in a live gallery. So I said, I'm not paying for another person, I'll do it myself. And that was why I did that. But I always got involved in the editing, just having a look at stuff. I could always make very constructive comments on things because I'd made programming myself. So but obviously as you go up in an organisation, a lot of your time is spent on people management and budgets and commercial return and all that sort of stuff.
How are you at people management?
I think I'm pretty good. I've invested a lot in myself on that. The BBC helped. They've sent us on Ashridge leadership courses and so on. But I always think that leadership is about inspiring people and about setting them good goals and targets, getting them to know where they're going and being fair. The leaders that I find the most confusing are ones who want to be your friends. And I think there's a lot of mixing in the workplace of, I just want to be your buddy, and people don't need their leader to be a buddy. It's nice if you get on, and it's nice if you like each other, but it's not the essential. The most important thing is to give people a fair time at work and know that they can get the best out of themselves in that environment.
I'm going to jump into that a bit more, but are we at a point when you decided to go out on your own and set up your own business?
Almost. I left UK TV to run Al Gore's TV channel, Current TV, which is a documentary channel.
Yeah.
I had to fly to San Francisco for a day for the interview.
You met him?
I have, yes. He came and spent a day with us in London.
And he's been proven right on
climate change.
On climate change.
He certainly has. So yeah, it was a great.
More than right.
It was it was a great opportunity, and it freed me up creatively.
How charming is he? How charismatic is he in real life?
Totally, and I was really surprised because he came to spend a day with us to do workshops with the team and to help develop what we were doing. And I thought, he's not really going to stay the day, you know, he'll disappear at one point. He stayed the day. Wow. And he took real interest in people, and he had lots to drink in the bar afterwards.
Is he super smart?
Yeah.
He comes across super smart.
He's a real people person, but he also knows a lot of stuff. So and he's passionate. And
he was able to get into the detail with you in your world.
Exactly. He asked the right questions. Yeah. It was great. It was a great opportunity. Unfortunately, he then had a bit of a bust up with the Murdochs over funding the channel, and that's the end of that. So,
Very good.
Yeah. And then that's when I set up my own business. And to be honest, I'd been commuting to London so much from Sussex, and I thought, really, I need to plant a pole and say this is where I'm going to stay in Sussex, do a bit more work in Sussex. That's how Beach to Beach happened.
How long has Beach to Beach been running, and what does it do?
It's been running about 7 years, and it started off with really being a front for my consultancy work. But in the last 2.5 years, we've grown it into a video production company. So we're making content for small and large businesses alike from our little base here in Arundel. Yeah.
And what's your journey been like? Was it a couple of key accounts to get you going, and from then your passion kind of filtered out to maybe a bit more local work?
Yeah, when I started, it's a bit gut-wrenching, isn't it, when you start something and you think, I don't know if this is going to work. And I sort of I created a story for myself. I mean, genuinely, I helped set up the smalls.com, but I wasn't paid, you know. It was just it was in-kind work, but that was my story. So I was very busy, obviously. I had lots of projects. I do quite a lot of work in Uganda. I've been doing training there, so I was talking about that. So I made myself sound very busy. But then out of the blue, I got a phone call from BBC Worldwide, and somebody I knew there wanted me to come in, be an interim manager for their global channels. And then almost the same day, I got a call from Discovery asking if I could go and sort out their channels in Northeast Europe based in Moscow. And weirdly, I managed to do both at the same time. So,
wow.
Yeah, and after that, it didn't stop. So
did that make the job even more interesting?
Oh yeah, it meant that I love the international aspect of what I then
just go in and punch people in the face in one place and then go into the next.
I do like doing the sort of red Adair of media where you get parachuted in, you look at what's going on and you sort it. I like sorting things, so it's really satisfying.
You're a fixer.
I'm a fixer, but I really pride myself on leaving behind the skill set for people to continue to be sustainable. Yeah. They shouldn't rely on me. I should be creating something that helps get them back on track.
Quite the opposite of a management consultant who would who would make sure you're still reliant so they can bill you per hour.
Yeah, that's true.
Forever.
I'm probably wrong, aren't I? But I don't like doing that. I don't get as much satisfaction because I actually like seeing people develop. And I did do a lot of work at BBC London in diversity and people development as well.
You don't strike me as somebody who's really in it for the money.
No, you're right. If I was, I wouldn't be doing film production in Sussex.
No.
Because, it isn't as profitable as consultancy.
Because most people, their journey looks the opposite to what your commercial one is. So they do a little bit of local stuff to land that big dream gig or two, but you're on the reverse.
Well, I started in local because I worked on local papers, so I suppose I've
but I mean,
sort of
when you're working for yourself.
Yeah, I love working for myself and I love the freedom of it. So I like variety, although sometimes it can be too much because you have so many things going on in your head. It's like, oh God, how can I get that organised? But I also wanted to create employment in this area, and we're starting to do that. So that's exciting. I like nurturing and developing new people.
And if you help businesses, they'll grow.
Exactly.
Walk me through this, right? So a company is used to doing something the same way. In my industry, we make 1,000 calls a day, or whatever the number is, and there's a process that they followed. But maybe now companies are starting to see that media can come in and do a lot of the business development stuff and the brand stuff that wasn't really there or the privy of small businesses before. How do you like structure that journey for the small businessman that doesn't know what he doesn't know? When like what like do they even expect half the stuff that you're going to come up with? And
I don't think so. I think it always starts a bit tentative, or we'd like a film. And it's like, okay, well, that's the last thing we need to start talking about. Yeah. The first thing is, what are you trying to say? Who are you? And I think one of the most important things, especially about small businesses, is people. It's people, you know, it's about trust, like getting to know why you should choose this company over another company. And the biggest expense on a business is the people who work for it. Yeah. And the biggest differentiator is the people who work in it. And I think getting to know people is so much easier through social media and film, and letting people go a bit, letting their personalities come out, letting them not be afraid of that. Yeah. And I suppose some of it is a bit like a brand laundry, isn't it, to start with, because you can't make content until you know what you're trying to say with your brand, what your special message is, and so on. And we all, as small businesses, need to do that regularly. Yeah. We need to regularly ask ourselves those questions and think, how am I articulating that?
I find myself that before I could, like I'd always say to myself, I'd love to get a good Facebook ad out there. And I'm always like, I need to get the website done before I do that. Probably need to get the branding redone. I need to, and before I know it, I'm in a full strategic marketing zone before I've got to the piece of content. And I think that makes it harder for us to work out, like, what do we do first? How do we go about it? How does a small business structure all of that?
I mean, what you guys do is right. You just get on with it. You try things, and you accept you're not going to be great at everything. Yeah. Some things will work, some things won't. But your learning from that is the most valuable thing. Yeah. You know? And then some things will just catch light. And I suppose you don't want to bite off more than you can chew as a small business. You don't want to go off in many directions at once. So I think try and think of one thing that you can do rather than the whole welt of it. Yeah. And get on and try that, and then build the rest of it. Because it's like the novels that never get written. Yeah. Because people have great ideas and talk a lot about them, but they don't actually put anything down in writing. Yeah. You've got to start somewhere. And I think just getting started. And a lot of what's driven me in my different iterations is just learning. Yeah. Just put yourself in a learning environment, create your own learning environment.
And as a video production person, you have people working for you. Yeah. What does your client spread look like now compared to when you started?
Well, you asked actually when I started, did I have in video production? I talked about consultants, but in video production, the reason why I sort of made the move was I was helping a language company to sort out its branding and reposition itself, and in the end change its name from Eurotalk to UTalk, and I started making quite a lot of video for them. Yeah. And I thought, beach to beach. I always said I wanted to have local people working for me. So I found Josh, who works for me now, through a friend of a friend, and he made a bit of one of the videos with me, and then another video for
He was
them.
Working in Tesco's before.
He was Sainsbury's, yeah.
Sorry, Josh.
And he was struggling to get a start. And in this part of the world, particularly West Sussex, it's not easy, and also kit is expensive and so on. So he did some work with me, and then the same company, I developed some work with them, and we ended up getting onto Emirates, doing in-flight learning videos on language learning. And basically I think we made about 15 to start for them. And I thought, that's quite good. So maybe I can give Josh a bit more work. Yeah. And that snowballed, and in the end became over 200 videos, which were really quite intense pieces of work, because they were all in different languages and quite a lot of template work. And, we did film all the intros and so on. And they're in flight now. Yeah. But once that started to come in, Josh went 3 days, and now he's full time. And then we've had other big clients coming in as a result.
You get a bigger, I can tell by looking at you, you get a bigger buzz giving a young person training and development than you do winning a big client.
Yeah, I think it's much more exciting.
Yeah. Do you envisage being able to get the business bigger so you can hire more young people?
Yeah, we've got a regular assistant camera person, as you know.
Yeah, he was great.
Connor. Yeah. And I've just seen another guy who's been doing a bit of filming with Josh on a music video. and he's already quite well set up, and so we're going to try and do some collaborations soon. So and it's interesting because I suppose I can give people, a lot of younger guys who've got better skills than me. I do second camera still, like to try and get my hand in, but what I've got in terms of experience is that understanding of how to produce things, how to get the story structured, because it's not just enough to just film something. You know you need to make it into a story a lot of the time. So that's what I can bring to the table.
Yeah, and cash.
Yeah, nice kit.
I think that almost has us at our end point. But if you could just give us some advice on any local businesses that are looking to win business, network, and get into getting better content, what would you say to them?
I suppose I'd say let the guard down, be yourselves, be a bit honest. Don't be afraid of being honest about who you are. Be very personable and social. Social media is called social for a reason, and the algorithms of social media totally favour doing video. Actually, live video is even more gets you even more points on the algorithm scores. So experiment, but experiment with safety. Get somebody in who knows what they're doing. That I'm not just saying myself. It needn't be myself. And we're also doing training for small companies in smartphone filming, so they can do a lot themselves on their own equipment. Just get the sound and lighting right.
And if they do want to use you, how can they find you?
Beach2beach.com. That's the beach trees.
Up
on the downs, and you can see the sea.
So jump onto the website.
Yeah. Oh, the website. Yeah. Or the Facebook or the Instagram. We're everywhere.
We're everywhere. Well, Jane, thanks so much.
It's been my pleasure.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.